Anyone testifying? Two. Oh, okay. Take your time. We're making room for you right now, sir.
Test.
Do you have two witnesses or just one? Two. Okay,
Can
you
you-
have 5
can you-
minutes
can you
total.
hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Is this thing on?
So you have 5 minutes total, so leave some time for each of you to talk.
Okay. Do I have a go? Like
Go.
One, two, three, go.
Go. There you go.
My name is Alfred Sanchez. I'm a homeless advocate in the city of Citrus Heights. What all of you see before you is the guy who's out there talking with the homeless every day. Okay? So, for that reason, I'm the guy out there on the streets talking to these people every day. That's why I implore you to listen to me, okay? I don't have a lot of time. I could talk this off for years. Number one, please do not sign any bills, as you're talking about amending, without clearly defining what camping is. Because otherwise, you take cities like mine, and they told the guy, as long as he sleeps there, he's fine, but the minute he puts a blanket on, he's camping. That is so wrong. Please, I implore you, you're looking at the guy who's out there every day. Do not sign any bills unless you can clearly define what camping is. Even in my own city, I'm the liaison between the homeless and the city, and they cannot define it. And it's just wrong, because you cannot punish everybody for what a few people are doing. As far as your syringes, I've been out there for 6 years. I've seen 2, and none of them were near homeless camps. Trust the cities and the counties to regulate their own people. What works in some places will not work everywhere. It's a broad law. You're saying this is going to work across the whole state, but it's not. In our city, the Department of Parks and Recs, they let us stay there, provided we follow certain rules. Why can't everybody else just do that? In our city, we sleep at the library, provided we follow certain rules. This is too far-reaching. It's too broad. We need to trust the cities to regulate their own people. They know their own situations. They know their homeless people. They know what can be done. So don't just out of frustration make a statewide bill that's not really going to be actable, or I'm looking for the right word, that, you know, that everybody can go by. You know, it's just too far-reaching. Thank you. I like this guy. And simply creating less places for people to be and less places for people to sleep doesn't solve the homeless problem. All it does is move them around. Trust me when I tell you, you cannot keep shuffling people around. It's dangerous. You guys here, you go home, you go in your houses, you go to sleep, you go in at night. You do not realize how difficult it is for people to be shuffled around. I mean, it's very territorial. You cannot just keep saying, oh, well, you can't be here, you can't be there, you can't be there.
Just want to make sure you leave some time.
I'm sorry?
It's been 2.5 minutes. Just want to make sure you leave some time for your other speaker.
Thank you, and I hope that you heard me, and I hope that you paid attention. Hit it.
Thank you.
Good morning, Brandon Green. I direct the Racial and Economic Justice Program at the ACLU of Northern California, and respectfully ask that you all vote no on this. This would do nothing but further stigmatize and criminalize the unhoused population, the majority of which is Black, brown, and indigenous. It relies on negative stereotypes of violence perpetrated by unhoused people. We all know that all of the incidents of violence, while tragic, that were discussed, are more likely to happen by housed people who commit violence every single day. We also know that there's not a distinction between unhoused people and children. So if we're talking about protecting children, many unhoused individuals are children. This does nothing to solve the unhoused problem that we have in California. A housing first model obviously would be a better solution. We also know that given the ubiquity of schools, daycare centers, et cetera, this would effectively bar unhoused people from all urban centers, which is where they get services that they need every single day. Finally, even though this has been amended to sort of limit the geographic scope, those amendments do nothing to mitigate any of the harms that I discussed, and so I respectfully ask that you vote no.
Thank you. Are there any other witnesses in opposition? Name and organization.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members. Gregory Kramer on behalf of Disability Rights California. We reject the generalization that homeless people are a threat to children.
That's it. Name and organization.
In opposition. Thank you.
Good morning, Michelle Parasite with Public Advocates in opposition.
Thank you.
Ahmed Aidid, Tarbiya Organization.
Thank you.
Danica Rodarmo on behalf of Initiate Justice and Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights in opposition.
Thank you.
Mark Stivers with the California Housing Partnership in opposition.
Thank you.
Alex Visotsky on behalf of National Alliance to End Homelessness in opposition.
Thank you.
Chris Martin on behalf of Housing California and the Corporation for Supportive Housing in opposition. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Cynthia Castillo on behalf of Western Center on Law and Poverty in opposition.
Thank you.
Carmen Nicole Cox on behalf of ACLU California Action in opposition.
Thank you.
Leslie Caldwell Houston for the California Public Defenders Association, in opposition.
Thank you.
Good morning, Jim Lindberg on behalf of the Friends Committee on Legislation of California, also in opposition.
Good morning, Esteban Nunez with the Anti-Recidivism Coalition and Social Change in opposition.
Thank you.
Good morning, Ed Little on behalf of Californians for Safety and Justice in opposition.
Thank you.
Glenn Backus, Ella Baker Center for Human Rights in opposition.
Thank you. Are there any other witnesses in opposition? We'll now bring it back to committee. I think Ms. Bonta wanted to have first question or comment.
Comment more than anything. I'm a school board member, former school board member. I'm a parent of 3. I went to a Quaker school that actually housed the homeless and sheltered the homeless in the evenings and then opened up its doors in the mornings to educate its children. Let me give you another scenario. Given the fact that there are 25% of the people who are homeless are children, it is quite possible that there could be a mother and her child in close to a daycare center, close to a school, camped, who could find themselves sleeping within the 500 foot radius of one of the sites that you have indicated here, who could, instead of grappling to be able to get their child into that school the next morning for breakfast, lunch, and education, could find themselves under this legislation charged with a misdemeanor, punished for up to 5 days, and incarcerated and put in county jail, and receiving a fine not to exceed $25. That, to me, is absolutely inhumane. The way to solve homelessness is not to criminalize poverty. I fully support the intention and the desire to make sure that our public spaces are safe, the desire and intention to make sure that we are resolving and addressing the issues of homelessness. I cannot, in good conscience, and as a legislator, as a parent and a school board member, condone the notion that we would actually criminalize a child and a mother trying to get to school and near that campus. For those reasons, I will not be voting for this bill.
Mr. Bryan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do recognize that this is solving homelessness, houselessness is a top priority for the state in many of our jurisdictions. But I think this approach ultimately runs counter to those goals. Los Angeles was mentioned many times. I know deeply what Los Angeles has been doing. Municipal Code 5611, 4118. A decade ago, 1 in 10 arrests by the LAPD was somebody who was unhoused. Today, it's more than 1 in 5. every dollar we've spent penalizing and criminalizing poverty is a dollar we could have invested in supportive housing, wraparound services. I'm the sibling of a crossover youth, now adult, who is currently unhoused. And this kind of a solution prohibits unhoused people from being in our municipalities, from being in our civic centers. As was heard in the testimony here, all of these spaces, if you set up a 500-foot perimeter, you ultimately bar out the city. It also behooves me to think that somebody who is struggling with deep poverty would then be cited with an infraction that would require them to pay anything, right? That runs counter to these goals. I hope that we can get to meaningful solutions. I think this kind of approach has been a mistake in every single city that's tried it, and I think it would be a mistake for us as a state to mandate this across cities across the state. And so while I respectfully appreciate the willingness to center homelessness as a priority of the authors, I think this particular approach, going through criminalization, is something that I will always stand up against.
Thank you. Mr. Ortega?
Good morning. Thank you for your testimony. And, you know, I heard your concerns about safety of our children and making them a priority. As a mother, I think about this every day. I want my child to be safe at school in any way, shape, or form. But as I looked at the summary of your bill today, the first sentence that's on here says, makes it a crime to camp on any street. Homelessness is not a crime. This also talks about demonizing, criminalizing, taking away rights to those that are protecting the safety of our children. We have teachers that are homeless. We have daycare providers that are homeless. Is that what we're trying to say as a state? That because you're homeless, we're going to fine you and we're going to send you to jail? That's how we're planning to keep our children safe? Homeless is an issue that we're all trying to work on. But criminalizing our homelessness is not the way to do it here in the state of California, not in the fourth largest economy in the world. We have to do better. I will not be supporting this bill.
Thank you. Mr. Lackey?
Okay, this is obviously a very difficult and delicate topic to address, no doubt about that. But we have to talk about realities as well. And one of the realities is like it or not, law enforcement is currently the relied upon arm of government intervention that deals with mental health difficulties. It's been that way for a long time. Law enforcement didn't ask for that. It's what we're left with. And this is a very narrow focus. It doesn't claim to solve homelessness. It doesn't claim to require officers to arrest and take action. It just gives them some authority in case they get resistance. Because you got to remember, I don't know what the percentages are, but it's a significant percentage of these people that are having difficulties. They don't trust the outside. They don't trust, because of circumstances within their own lives, they don't want intervention. And they have a high degree of difficulty managing their lives. So what this bill is designed to do is it's designed to be a balanced approach. Balance is really what we need, because right now we have a very strong imbalance because we're doing nothing or very little. We're trying, but we need something that will actually work. And here this narrow focus is to protect, and to protect those who deserve protection. We're talking about schools. We're talking about sensitive areas where people deserve to feel comfortable. And unfortunately, because of the dysfunction, and there's a lot of very difficult circumstances that are hard for us to understand as a society. And clearly, the homeless problem is not a new problem, and it's continually growing the wrong direction. And so all we're trying to do is give law enforcement another tool. It doesn't require them to hook these people up and take them to jail just because they're camping on the sidewalk. They're trying to be the arm of intervention. And trying to relocate these folks is what everybody would benefit from. And I know that that's something that's really, because there's lack of trust with law enforcement, and that's part of our problem. Is there's some negative stereotyping of law enforcement that gets in the way of good decision making. And I will tell you that the majority of law enforcement, they want good outcomes. And we see some examples of betrayal of trust. Please don't overgeneralize and think that that's the majority of officers. It's just unfair to them, and it's unfair to our public. They don't want to just go and put handcuffs on these people and tell them you're going to go to jail and impose more difficulty into their lives. But the tool exists, and it's like a wobblet. It's not a wobbler because that's a felony and misdemeanor. This is an infraction and misdemeanor. And it's only if there's strong resistance. They have a tool that they can take another course of action. Because unfortunately, sometimes that is the only safe intervention. And that's the reason why I'm going to support this bill, is because it just gives another tool that I hope would never be abused. And we've got to do something to protect those who deserve protection and try to create some kind of balanced circumstance. Because right now, there's just so much dysfunction and nobody is winning, nobody. And so I'm going to clearly support this approach.
Thank you. Mr. Santiago.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's a lot I want to say without having to repeat what my colleagues have said. So I'll echo those comments to be briefer on what's going on in my soul as we talk about homelessness. Because oftentimes I think there's a lot of misunderstandings and a lot of things we want to throw out there, like this concept of folks who are homeless don't want help. I mean, nobody wakes up in the morning and decides that they can't afford their rent or they don't want to afford their rent. Nobody wakes up in the morning and decides that they're going to have a tragedy happen in their life. And I think there's a lot of assumptions around saying we're going to criminalize an act of being homeless, and it assumes a lot of different things. It assumes that somebody wants to do this. It assumes that there aren't economic circumstances where a person loses their jobs. It assumes that there aren't mental health care issues in our society. It assumes that there isn't substance abuse issues in our society. And the easy thing to do when we're solving homelessness, and we went through this, right? I mean, Los Angeles went through this since it was thrown around when they did the policies of containment decades ago. And it was easy at that time to say, we'll solve homelessness by containing homelessness in a particular area. And here we are generations later that we now know is Skid Row, an area that wasn't solved the way it should have been from the very beginning. And the easy thing is always to do is, let's lock them up and throw away with the key. We already went through that at the federal level with the Crimes Act bill. And we continue to have this conversation about just lock everybody up who we don't like, who for one reason or another, they either do this, they do that, or they look this way, or they've done this. Instead of going to the core roots of why there is homelessness, why there is an issue in society. So if we're going to get serious about solving homelessness, then let's get serious about affordable housing. Let's get serious about rental assistance. Let's get serious about tenant protections. Let's get serious about mental health care funding. Let's get serious about substance abuse treatment. Let's get serious about the things that people really need to prevent homelessness and to ease us off homelessness and get people back on their feet or into a unit. And yeah, Los Angeles went through this debate, but it's a very, very different debate. So I don't want to go into the Los Angeles debate too much, but a blanket approach that says let's criminalize everybody who doesn't have a home because all of a sudden the rents went up and somebody has to live on the streets, you call them a criminal. All of a sudden there was a landlord that kicked somebody out and that person becomes a criminal. That all of a sudden, and I'm being overly simplistic here with my comments, not to be taken out of context, but it really is in a lot of ways. And I don't want to say this too. I don't like to say too much from up here, but it really is cruel and inhumane to think that somebody is homeless and let's go move them across the street, let's go move them 5 blocks down, or let's just go put them out of sight, out of mind. And I don't want this conversation to be pit around, what law enforcement should be as it relates to or pit about, law enforcement should do this, law enforcement should do that. Let's be very clear. If we write a law that says law enforcement arrest people, then law enforcement is going to be required to arrest people. If we don't write this law and it doesn't pass, then they won't have the requirement to do it. And we don't see a whole heck of a lot, at least from what I see here, a lot of law enforcement lining up to say, hey, let's go do this. And I appreciate the approach of an author-sponsored bill. I've done that many of times myself. But I think and I also want to say that I do appreciate your approach to bringing attention to a very important issue like homelessness. But I'd say join the effort in trying to figure out something that is humane, something that is not cruel, something that will address why we have homelessness, something that will help us to solve the problem, to bring some dignity to people who for one reason or another are not fortunate to be housed. And I think language is important too. I think some of us have gravitated from off and on to talk about our unhoused population. Because I think language is also important. And there's some dignity to that. Look, I can go on forever because I feel very, very emotional about this issue when it comes to the issue of homelessness. But I don't want to let us allow the oversimplification of a conversation that we could just arrest our way out of homelessness and it's going to solve the problem. It's just not. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other comments? You may close, Mr.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate it, and I appreciate the discussion. I do agree with my colleague, Mr. Santiago, that there is much more that needs to be done. I think all of us actually agree with that in this room. And as I mentioned in my open, I look forward to being a part of those solutions, and I look forward to working with you all on those solutions. I want to just clarify a couple things on this bill specifically, because I think we have spoken in a lot of generalizations about what this bill does. One of the amendments we took was to address a specific concern that was brought up pretty early on in our first version of the bill, which I acknowledged was an issue and we fixed, was that the goal of this bill is not to criminalize an individual homeless person. And it does not give law enforcement any authority to take any action against a specific homeless person and their child or anything like that. What the bill in its current form does specifically is address the issue of encampments, specifically as defined in the bill. And the way we define it in this bill is encampment means 3 or more persons camping together within 50 feet of each other and without permitted electrical power. There's also another part in our definitions that discuss the time period that would inquire. So again, the goal of this bill was not to address an individual homeless person's ability to be in a public space. It is simply to address the issue of encampments and actually long-term encampments in our parks. And so I just wanted to make sure that that is made clear because, and again, it is something that I am happy to continue working on with the opposition. I'm happy to continue working on with the folks of this committee as well. But to close, I do want to touch on the main motivations for this bill, and that is the public safety of our community. These stories are not meant to be stereotypes. They are not meant to create fear around everyone. What they are is that we are acknowledging that there are things that are happening in our communities that need to be fixed. As my colleague to my right, Mr. Gatewood, talked about in his presentation, Emma Rourke was raped and murdered. She was 20 years old. She was raped and murdered on the American River Parkway in Rancho Cordova. Timothy Farrell, 60 years old, riding an electric bike in Rancho Cordova neighborhood on November 28th. He was attacked with a machete near a preschool. An unhoused man killed a 74-year-old Carmichael resident in my district in what the Sheriff's Department called an unprovoked and senseless homicide. These are real people's stories, real incidents that are happening in my community specifically. These are just the things happening in my district. And I think we need to be honest that these that these things should not happen in our communities. And that was the motivation for why I brought this bill forward. Again, I respectfully ask for an aye vote. I'm happy to work with the members of this committee to improve the bill if there are suggestions, but I hope that you'll support it. Thank you.
Okay. And thank you, Mr. Hoover. I guess the main suggestion, probably the only suggestion, at least of where you can start, is to look to Los Angeles. I'm not saying that because Mr. Santiago, Mr. Bryan, and I are from Los Angeles, but Mr. Santiago, for several years, had Skid Row, which is now in my jurisdictional responsibility. And it's my understanding, if we were to solve just Skid Row alone, we could cut 25% of the homeless population out of the mix and move forward. But the real reason why I say look to Los Angeles, and I'm glad you brought your people from your area, is I have a bill where we're going to try to create homeless czars or homeless leaders or coordinators or someone that can take care of that can wrap their arms around it. And it's really based on Los Angeles. So look to Los Angeles. Look what Mayor Karen Bass is doing and what she's done so far, and how she's not only got people off the street, but she's not criminalizing them, she's humanizing them so that they can get the wraparound services and get to shelter so that we can then bring them in and back into society. It's a tough job. I think she's done several hundred so far, and we're going to see how effective it is. But it is having one person who has the guts and the bravery to say, I'm going to, take the bull by the horn and I'm going to tackle this. And that's what's going on in Los Angeles. So when you were asking about what kind of solutions we should be looking at, I'm saying look at Los Angeles. Again, I'm not saying it because I'm from there. It's just I'm saying it because I can see it. And I can see how it's improving our ability to handle the homeless situation. And it may ultimately, when we look back on this a year from now, 2 years from now, it may be the way you handle homelessness nationwide. And so I would suggest, especially if this were to not make it, that you actually look at what some successful programs that people have done. And one of the things you will find across the board where they've been successful, as far as actually helping homeless people get off the street into permanent supportive housing, is that they don't criminalize them. And we just don't put the burden on law enforcement. We get the professionals that can help people who are on the street, help them move on into a productive life. So unfortunately, I can't vote for this. What I want you to do, if you're really serious about coming up with a methodology to work with everyone, and I know every city is different. That's why I want a homeless czar in different places, because every place is different. Every person is different. And so and hopefully as we move forward, you can even support my bill about a homeless czar. We can get things done. So with that, unfortunately, I can't support this bill, but I think if you look at what we're doing in Los Angeles, you might be able to come back, if you so ask for reconsideration, with something that makes sense that we all can agree on. Is there a motion?
Yes. Move the bill.
Yes. The bill's been moved and seconded on AB 257 by Assemblymember Hoover. The motion is due pass to the Appropriations Committee. Jones Sawyer.
No.
Jones Sawyer, no. Alanis. Aye. Alanis, aye. Bonta.
No.
Bonta, no. Bryan.
No.
Bryan, no. Lackey.
Aye.
Lackey, aye. Ortega. No. Ortega, no. Santiago. No. Santiago, no. Zabur. Zabur, no. That
measure fails.
Would appreciate reconsideration if that's accepted.
If there's no objection, that by unanimous consent.
Thank you.
You want to object? You can. Item number 7, AB 328, Asaley. She's tough. She's tough. See, I know you. Hi, good morning, Mr. Saley. Item number 7, AB 328. Whenever you're ready.
Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Chair. Just one second.